Welcome to the Bear Hug Experience, where we cozy up to the fire in our digital den and immerse ourselves in the inspiration born from exploring the hidden narratives and inevitable plot twists that shape every compelling startup journey. Join us as we showcase inspirational guests from bold investors with the Midas touch to pioneering entrepreneurs at the helm of today's most thrilling startups. We'll also hear from courageous go-to-market leaders navigating the frontier of emerging tech and the unsung heroes bringing all the people and parts together to form unstoppable dream teams. Here's your host, Kraig Ward, founder and managing director of Bear Hug Recruiting. Get ready for an insightful journey.
The following is a conversation with Spencer Dusebout, a serial entrepreneur and the founder and CEO of Aidium, a software platform that helps mortgage professionals automate their lead conversion, transaction management, and client retention workflows, and has become one of the fastest growing software companies in the PropTech sector. Prior to starting Aidium, Spencer co-founded Hands for Others, a youth-based nonprofit aspiring to solve the world's water crisis, an idea that started on the back of a napkin and became an international movement that provided safe water to people in 17 countries around the world. As a technologist at heart, Spencer has spent the last decade building and selling software companies spanning predictive data, machine learning, and enterprise software. He's also a sought-after speaker, having graced the stage of the TED Conference twice. Welcome to the Bear Hug Experience. And now, dear friends, fellow entrepreneurs, investors, and startup enthusiasts, here is Spencer Dusebout. All right, Spencer, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, no, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So how are you feeling coming into this? Is this something that you do on a regular basis, or has it been a while?
I love to have conversations like this on a regular basis in this type of a format, sort of more long form. Bit new to me, but I do a number of kind of smaller burst podcast, webinar stuff, but it's oftentimes related around sort of, my company and whatnot. So love these types of discussions and dialogues. And but yeah, I don't do many of them in sort of a long form podcast format.
Well, I like to always start off with people talking about the mission that they're on, right? So why don't you start off by telling our listeners what you're up to these days and why it matters?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've always been entrepreneurial. Um, I like to look at what are problems I can solve in the world. How can I create things of value that change people's lives? It's taking me down a number of different paths, if you will. At the moment, the path is sort of around this company Aidum that I started, and the mission is to really help improve the real estate sort of transaction process. So, look, that's the most important purchase of anybody's, just about everybody's life, if you will, if you're going to end up buying a home. There's a lot of optionality as you build equity within that and kind of planning for your future, retirement. It's the biggest asset you're going to own. And so for me, it's really just empowering those who are at the table to make that a great experience for the customer, make sure everyone's on the same page, and then being able to kind of be on that journey with them once they are a homeowner to really make sure that you can kind of sort of be that trusted advisor, if you will, and whatnot. And so I think there's a lot of room for improvement right now. There's sort of a this idea that you can kind of just push a button and get a mortgage, and you really don't know what it means. And so sort of on that mission to you help educate the market and empower everybody that's facilitating real estate transactions.
What's your perspective on the market right now? I mean, we're in an interesting point in time, right? Do you have just a quick high level, 60-second overview of how are you seeing this period of the year and this time in the market?
Yeah, there's a number of different dynamics going on in the market. So I think first there's a major supply demand imbalance. So there's a massive shortage of homes in the United States as opposed to those who want to buy them. And it's so massive that the amount of homes that we've built, if we were to repeat this year 30 years, like basically right now, we would catch up. So we're 30 years behind in terms of supply, and we can talk about why that is. But I mean, that's obviously a huge dynamic and one of the reasons why prices continue to rise. And I don't think they're going to be coming down anytime soon. And then of course you couple that with really high interest rates, which really just creates a lot less buying power. So people that maybe could afford a home when rates were lower can no longer afford to buy a home, and that also it just means there's a lot less inventory, and prices are still really high, and they're out of reach of most Americans. I think you've also seen a number of different kind of investment vehicles, if you will, that have bought up, especially when rates were low, a lot
Mhm.
of homes all across the nation, because they've seen this analysis and they know that they can make a good return on buying those homes just by renting them out, and then they're going to appreciate as an asset class as well. And so because of that as well, you have this dynamic where rents have been increasing over a number of years. I mean, starting to kind of level off a bit, but the basic end result is, real estate, I think, is a maybe not so much commercial real estate, but residential is a fantastic asset class. It's just out of reach of most Americans at this point in time. And that's unfortunate. It's something that we need to solve. Absolutely. I mean, shelter is one of the biggest core needs that everybody has. And I think just looking at it through like the lens of professionals, so realtors, mortgage professionals, it's definitely been a much more challenging market. This market is cyclical to an extent, but it's been a really tough year. I think just how quickly the change happened.
Mhm.
I think people were not prepared for it. I think people are prepared now. I think the those in the mortgage space, that sort of have survived are in a good spot, and they're prepared for what's to come. And I think we'll see probably relief quicker than what most people are expecting. Um, but I think just the rate of how quickly things change definitely threw people for a loop, and obviously not just in real estate, but I think real estate was probably one of the most impacted industries by how quickly interest rates went up, and kind of the economic conditions shifted last year.
So, Spencer, I'm super interested in talking through how these dynamics of the market are impacting your business, right? Because you started the company when things were different, and now they've shifted a lot. So we can get into that here in a little bit. But aside from weathering this tremendous change that everybody has had to weather in our own way, what makes you uniquely suited to tackle this particular challenge or set of problems as it relates to this particular industry? Like, what would you say is the superpower that you have that makes you uniquely suited to tackle this? How would you label it?
Yeah, sure. I think it's I'm not someone who's great at focusing on a number of different things at once. But if you put one or two really hard problems in front of me, I can be quite obsessive and relentless in my pursuit of sort of solving those.
Mhm.
And the way that I see it is, you know, we're in an industry where there's a lot of extremely antiquated technology, systems that aren't even on the cloud. So you have to have like a Windows PC to use technology to help underwrite loans or manage your database or things like that. Um, and so we're bringing modern technology into this space. And when times are good, the way I like to see it, and I'm very critical of I'm very proud of what we built, but I'm also very critical and I'm trying to be as objective as possible of our products. The thing that I keep telling our team and thinking about is, in a really good market, people that are on C products switch to B products. In a really tough market, they might not, because there's a lot of time and money and energy that can be required. And it's like, well, yes, there's an ROI, but is it worth it for me to do it right
Mhm.
now? I don't know. And so the way I think about it and the way I keep telling our team is, look, like, in this market to win, we've got to be an A product and an A
Mhm.
experience. Um and so what it's done is it's just, that's sort of the calculus that I have. And I'm pretty undeterred in that. It's like, great. This is what we need to do. We're being forced to, maybe we had plans to launch these new products or functionality and things like that. And we fast tracked that. We're going to be releasing it, some of these things, which is just kind of like a month away. So um, I think that's the way that I look at it. It's just I'm fairly persistent and resilient. Have just kind of taken in a lot of information about what it's going to take to win in this market, and then for me it's just driving it home. Right? We can sit around um, and feel sorry for ourselves about the market getting tougher and all these
Yeah.
people that were throwing money at us a year and a half ago, and now it's a lot harder to get those deals, or we can just make it so that way they're gonna, everyone starts throwing money at us again, regardless of what the market looks like. And so I think that's sort of my superpower, and ultimately why I think we're well positioned to win this category in the long run.
I love what you said about in a good market, people will switch from like a C to a B, but in a really hard market, they're only going to make that jump to something truly worthwhile that's an A. So I think that's a great point. And it sounds like the way that you see the superpower that would apply to all areas of your life, especially when conditions are shifting and the challenges might seem much harder than they may have been anticipated to be. It sounds like sort of a, a relentless focus and obsessive focus on a small set of problems. And you may have already kind of answered the other question I'd like to ask people on the flip side as it relates to the shadow side of a superpower, like being too spread out, focused on too many problems. Is that what you would label as sort of the thing that often can cause you to slip or to become distracted as having like how would you define what your kryptonite ultimately is? The thing that kind of slows you down or stops or stands in your way?
Yeah, I think there's two kryptonites. That I think the first would be is managing 10 different tasks, right? So again, I like to focus on what I believe has the most impact to the business, and to move at warp speed and to obsess and to just make it happen. And so
Hmm.
what can happen there is maybe I'm solving problems one and two, but problem 4 or 5 or task 4 or 5 might slip through the cracks or not get addressed. Um, in and so I think I can that can certainly be a challenge for me. I think also the flip side of that is once a problem solved, I tend to look for the next thing that I can solve, or kind of drive in a way. And so um, what that can mean is that oftentimes when we have really big successes or things go well, I'm not the best person to celebrate, because it's like, great, let's on to the next thing. Um, which building a culture and a company is, celebrating is the wins along the way is super important. I'm not naturally great at that,
Hmm.
and I think that uh, and along with that, it's once you solve a problem, it's just making sure. I mean, I think I'm a lot better at this now, but earlier on in my career, I'd look for the next problem, and then it's like um, you know, and then you kind of hand that solution off to someone to run with, and
Hmm.
maybe it doesn't, it can slip if you're not super clear about exactly what needs to be done, and how they can continue to really operationalize that. And so I'd say that's the shadow side, if you will.
Yeah, I kind of saw that coming when you talked about moving on to the next one. The need to be able to stop and celebrate what you've accomplished and transition to something new, and then being able to set something up and moving on, and having somebody to stay back and um, optimize and continue to innovate, right, in something that's been built. So, in order to give our listeners a window into where you come from, just for fun, and I love to do this with every guest because it's what I do with every candidate that I recruit. I'm going to ask you to tell me your entire life story from the moment you were born up until today with an imposed 5 minute time cap. So I do this with people I recruit, and I might talk to them for 2 or 3 minutes, and I'll be like, okay, I'm going to just do a fun little thing with you. Look at the clock, hold yourself to a 5 minute time cap, tell me your whole story, go. And it shocks them. They're like, wait, what? And I'm like, just for fun, there's no mistakes. You can't get it wrong. If you start to feel rushed at the end, it's totally fine. I love to just put that self-imposed pressure just to see like what sticks out when a person's trying to put all the pieces together when they're under this time pressure. So if you'll do that same exercise, I'd appreciate it. Look at your clock, hold yourself to that 5 minute time cap, and let's see what comes out.
Sure. Yeah. And I might even be quicker than that. And then we can dig in wherever appropriate.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, I was born in Southern California, um, and in Los Angeles. My family moved to Santa Barbara when I was pretty young. Um, I had two younger sisters, so I'm the oldest. Was fortunate to have a great family dynamic. My parents are still together,
Mm.
and are fantastic people. And so, um, for me, I'd say I had uh, a great childhood. Um, I think, and I think as I kind of grew up and grew into kind of like the middle school, high school years, if you will, I was a little bit sort of ahead of like ahead as far as like what class I was in. So I was a little young for my grade. So I think kind of socially, there's some challenges for me. I didn't fit in particularly well. Um, I've always been someone that has has strong opinions. And I think I had to kind of learn how to hold those opinions to myself, and when I could appropriately engage with people,
Mm.
sort of with those opinions. So, um, I think for me, sort of some of the challenges maybe I experienced socially drove me to maybe want to go down more of an entrepreneurial path, where you start thinking in the back of your head, like, well, um, can I could I climb the ladder at a big company or something like that? Or, or am I just sort of, maybe do I have, is it challenging for me to kind of relate to, more of like a mainstream culture, mainstream path, if you will? So I think that's definitely a part of my story. And kind of put that to the test in high school. I helped start a nonprofit called Hands for Others. Basically, myself and some friends were on a trip to Belize, and we saw people walking miles and miles to gather water out of a river, and the water looked a lot more like coffee than it did water. And that's what they were drinking, and began to understand the economic impacts of that, not just health, but also, the fact that women and children are spending hours every day just gathering water, and how that was sort of trapping them in a poverty cycle. So we took it upon ourselves to raise money to help that community get clean water. Turned out a lot of people liked what we were doing, wanted to be a part of it. So we ended up creating a crowdfunding platform sort of before the GoFundMe's of the world existed. And we gave other groups of high school and college students the opportunity to raise funds and awareness to solve the world's water crisis. And we did projects 17 countries around the world, helped over 300,000 people get clean water. I ultimately ended up doing a TED Talk about that, and stayed in Santa Barbara to go to college and kind of continue to run that nonprofit, if you will, and um, learned a lot of great lessons through that. Like, we had a board, and I had to get board approval on our financials and our budget and stuff like that. And not to say we had many employees or anything, but you start to kind of learn those lessons early, and how to pitch a vision and a mission and to get people behind it. And coming out of college, um, you know, I think I took a stab at kind of running it and taking it to the next level. At that point, I was really just a volunteer up to that point. So realized I'd have to raise a lot of money if I wanted to pay myself and pay other people. And I think for me, it became clear that I was really passionate about the technology and platform we had built, more so than the maybe the nonprofit arena, so to speak. So
Mhm.
um, dabbled with a bunch of different startup interests. Um, Learned a set of technical skills. I didn't in college. I got degrees in business, economics, and religious studies. So you're not really anything computer science related, but realized that I had to have some sort of a technical acumen to to build an app or to build kind of be a part of that world. Um, so kind of started to dabble in self learning there. Did a couple of different ideas. Nothing really. Some things maybe paid the bills, some things not so much, and um, eventually stumbled upon a company called Lead Faucet. We're doing predictive data and analytics in the real estate space. That was the first sort of thing that really took off. Ultimately, was acquired, kind of got me into this sort of property tech space, and that led to Aidium, which is sort of what I'm doing now. And I think also just worth mentioning that, um, I was very fortunate to sort of find a person who's now my wife back in college, and we've been together for a long time. And um, so that's a big part of uh, my journey and sort of our collective journey as well, is sort of being young and together and doing life together. Um, and me being on this entrepreneurial path, it definitely had to focus me at times to make sure that we could pay our rent and and stuff like that. And so I think that's another piece of my story. But yeah, I mean, that's broad brushstrokes. How did I do? Was I over under 5 minutes?
I think you're right on the money. No, that was great. That was, man, there's so many things there I'm curious about. One of the patterns that stood out to me right away, there's many of them, but this not fitting in socially and having strong opinions. I'm wanting to ask, do you feel like that was just something that was nature or nurture? I mean, is that something that was, do you think you were modeling anybody at that point, or was it something that you just had a unique perspective on life coming out of the womb? Did anybody influence you to have those strong opinions?
I'd say it's a combination of nature nurture. So I think on the nature side, like if you were to look at a big five personality test, I would score on the disagreeable side of things for
Okay.
sure. And I think that that's probably more of a nature um, type of a thing. And
Hmm.
I do think that um, I think kind of growing up, my dad and I would oftentimes argue about different issues, just kind of for the sport or the fun of it, if you will. Starting at a really young age, if you will.
Hmm.
Um, I think he had and still has strong convictions on a number of different fronts. And so I think if that became pretty normal for me to like not only have a strong opinion, but then to be able to try and hash it out with people. Um, and I it turns out that that's not normal for probably most people or for a lot of people. So I think it's a combination of I'm more that way just from a nature standpoint, and then it was maybe I would say be normalized or encouraged perhaps to a certain extent. But I think my mom always tells this story of when I was like I was a very argumentative child, if you will, and so um, so there's a story of like where I would always have to argue and try to get the last word in, and so basically like every time, so we were I guess arguing about something, and I wouldn't shut up, and I basically just kept trying to argue and with her, and so basically the timeout kept going up 10 minutes every time that I would keep arguing with her, and it ended up being like 4 hours and something at the end of the day. Um, so I think that that encapsulates perhaps maybe more of a the nature side of that, and you could certainly see how over time I've had to sort of figure out how I can I mean, I'm definitely not. I have strong convictions today, but I've had to sort of figure out how can I, manage that, if you will, because yeah, that's it's a hard way to build community and build friendships and, and motivate people when you're doing things like that.
Yeah, so there's like early signs of this strength of personality and character and perspective on how things are being done. Like it sounds like you were oriented in a particular way to solve problems and to see things differently and to question a lot of things. So I'm getting a lot of flashbacks to raising my own children right now, and I'm thinking of my son in particular. And it's you give me hope, right? I was the same way too, but just hearing people giving their parents such a hard time and then growing out of it and being able to create value in the world and figure out how to like sort of shape those rough edges to a workable state that can be uh, aligned with other people and creating a vision and getting people to execute. That's awesome. So when if we go back to this trip you took to Belize, and was that sort of the early signs of seeing a problem and being like, why isn't anybody doing something innovative about this? Was that sort of your earliest big aha moment where you're like, I'm going to actually put something together to solve that problem? Or were there things that you did at an earlier age?
I would say that I was always somewhat entrepreneurial, if you will. Where my friend and I one summer, like almost every day, we would do like a lemonade snow cone stand type of a
Hmm.
thing. So I think that there was elements of that. I think for me, I've never really been motivated heavily by money. It's been more of the pursuit of figuring something out. And so I think for me growing up, it's into different types of sports. So I would relentlessly try and learn and practice about how I could be better at different sports. I think there was, I guess the example is I was in like third grade or something and I was obsessed with baseball and got the Sports Illustrated magazine where it basically had all the stats and like by the end of a few weeks after spring break, I could like, basically tell you, most people or team stats, or whatever. And so I think there's just more of that, like whatever sort of attracts my attention. I can't always control it. I tend to agree with sort of the Jeff Bezos line, which is, your passions or your interests pick you more than you pick them. I think that's
Mm,
certainly been the case for me. Even now, it's like I get these random different interests that just perk my interest, and I become obsessed, and I have to kind of figure out um how to be good or be conversational about these different topics or these different activities. And so I think it's been more that I think maybe less like starting a business, really trying to. I think it's been more of like these different things kind of catch my attention. I think that time in Belize was maybe the first time on like on a meaningful scale where maybe that aligned with the entrepreneurial side, where it's like, wow, this is a really problem. I'm getting to know these people's lives and how it's impacting them and how they're sick and how they don't make a lot of money if they have to spend most of their money on medicine. Women can't start small businesses or kids can't necessarily go to school. And so you start I just became really obsessed with that, just that whole concept. It was so new to me and it was so obviously in my face that um I became obsessed with learning about it um and then sort of was able to align that and take action. And so I wouldn't say it was the first time in my life, but I think it was the first time on really a more meaningful scale that I was able to take that sort of obsession and interest and then channel it into doing something fairly significant or substantial.
and so when you think about you were there with some friends, right? And you just had that
Hmm.
observation about like them having to walk to get water. Were your friends looking at you like, "Why are you getting obsessed with this?" Or were they also inspiring you, and were they part of the same group that put that whole organization together?
They were definitely a part of putting it together. I think they saw a lot of the same things that I did. I mean, I think for all of us, it was sort of that first exposure to something that really maybe shatter. I don't want to say shatter, but just challenges your worldview and your experiences. Um,
Mhm.
and I think that we've all had those experiences, but especially that first one of it's really stark, and you're like, I'm used to seeing life in this way or the world in this way, and it turns out that you see something right in front of your eyes that is so evidently contrary to that. It really, I think it made a huge impact on all of us. So I would say that probably I was maybe the most obsessed or determined, but it was definitely a group effort, and it was shared amongst all of us.
So you were obsessed to solve a problem as can you think of like the underlying motivation? Because you weren't doing it for money. It was a problem. You're in high school, right?
Mhm.
So you like other people are, I don't know, chasing girls and going to parties and getting their driver's license or whatever else is going on, thinking about college. And you're like, you know what? Screw all that stuff. I'm gonna do like, did you have a balanced life or did that become your entire like world outside of school, that project? Or did you like were you just able to juggle a lot of different things?
No, no. So kind of going back to the superpower kryptonite, I'm not good at juggling a lot of different
Right.
things. So yes, that became probably most of my life outside of school. I think it also became an outlet to me to an extent. Like, not to say that I didn't have friends in high school or things like that, but
Mhm.
I didn't probably have the typical high school experience, if you will. And so this became also an outlet for me to put my time and energy into as well.
I think it's interesting when you consider that you saw that you could do something, you saw momentum, you saw the impact, you weren't making any money at it. You had a board, had to get budget approvals. You started to understand that organizational structure and how to lead. And it sounds like you then somehow realized you wanted to do sort of an early fundraising platform. And that was that sort of the first inkling you had that technology was the more interesting solution to build?
Yeah, it I think it was more of how do you scale this?
Mm,
And so I think it came down to like, great, so there's really 6 of us that raised 25 grand to bring clean water to this community. Um, are there 6 other people like us that wanna do something like this? I mean, and it could be anywhere. It could be in, you know, we're in California, but I mean, it could be someone in Kansas or Florida or New York or wherever, right? Like, are there other people just sitting around looking for something like this? And it turns out, I mean, this was before like the Charity Waters of the world existed. The
mhm,
Gates Foundation was putting money into, the kind of clean water stuff. And it turns out there's a lot of really kind of crappy solutions, if you will, out there. And we started to learn on our research. And so, we had done all that diligence, and we had kind of seen what was working, what wasn't working, and formed the right partnerships, if you will. And so, so I think for us, we just said, okay, great. Like if there's other groups of people that are motivated to do something about this, we can give them the tools and the platform and the technology to basically start, to kind of crowdfund online. And we had like the text to give stuff, which was big, long time, but we had all that stuff in place. And then we had sort of the back end partners in the field that could then, we could, give the money to, and they could help provide clean water to those communities. And so we had done all that work, um, but ultimately realized the only way it could scale was if we sort of built the technology and kind of created a package, if you will, that we could send to that group of of students in Florida or somewhere else, and they could take it and run with it. And so, but
mm,
the technology is what made it possible. Um, it's really my first foray into building a product. I mean, the product wasn't all online. It was partially like, here's this folder too of all these different things.
yeah,
But then you start to think about like, well, can we get that team in Florida on a website where they can, people can see how much they're raising, and they can put their pictures from their event, right? And that can inspire other people. And so I think it was really my first foray into building a product. And I realized that you can iterate quickly with products that are tech based, and they scale, basically, infinitely. So, I think that was sort of that's really what I learned from all that.
were there any mentors that you had, or was this a lot of just being self-led and observing things and just kind of, shooting at a particular direction? Any, like, early mentors that were doing certain things that you were modeling in any way?
Definitely mentors that came along the way. And I think there was some people in our community that, also sort of sat on the board that um that mentored me. Obviously I had a really great relationship with my parents and my dad growing up in particular. And so, he would love to kind of bounce different ideas. I could bounce different ideas off him, sort of strategize with him, or these other people that kind of sat on our board and whatnot. I think so yeah, I think that there was a lot of support there, if you will.
Mhm.
I do think that the actual like kind of positioning the product, and so to speak, and getting other people excited and moving that forward, I think that was more of a kind of trial by error, and me sort of pushing that forward. So, which is, the kind of how it is for entrepreneurs, right? You have to figure out how to build a product and sell it and get people to part with their hard-earned money, and then maybe you have a board or, investors or other, people that are there to support you and whatnot, and to help where they can. But really, like, you've got to be in the one in the trenches figuring out how you can make it work. And I think my experience at Hands for Others was very much like that for me. So I couldn't rely on others. Like, I had to figure out a way to make it go and scale.
Okay, so you're studying economics, business, and religious studies, right? And you're sort of self-teaching your side. self-teaching yourself this sort of technical realm because you see the scalability of tech products, right? Um, Walk me through the lead faucet piece. Was that something that you founded or was that something you joined?
Something that I founded. So after college was dabbling. I mean, and during college too, dabbling, which is different entrepreneurial ideas. Eventually, I had a good friend who was he's a little bit older, so he's probably in his early 30s at that point. Who was a realtor and was doing pretty well. And so I just got to understand more and more about sort of how his business works and where the pain points were, and and ultimately how how they can get customers and clients and grow. And that kind of led to us thinking about how we could create this piece of technology that would basically maybe, because the gold standard in real estate is to get listings, because you put you list the house for sale, I mean, very likely it's going to get bought and the
Mhm.
transaction will happen and you're going to get your commission. Buyers are a different story because you have to find the right house for them and get the, funding and everything through. Right. So, I mean, and, um, and the buyer also might, after a time, not be able to find something correct. They might have another realtor friend that they might go with. And so, for every 3 buyer leads you get, one listing lead is better, is kind of the rough math on that, at least from my perspective. So he wanted more listings because he's a nice, personable guy, getting all these buyer leads. And it's like, well, none of these people are actually want to buy right now. Or I had someone that I showed houses to and they called up their, cousin who was a realtor and did the transaction with them. And I got nothing. And so it's like, okay, let's figure out we can get you some listings. And basically we started to think through, like, what is it that makes someone list a house? Like, why would they list, and how can you predict that? And so we started to understand, like, what types of things would predict that. I mean, there's sort of the life events, some of which are unfortunate, but, like, I mean, obviously if someone gets divorced, or um, if someone were to pass away, or someone's kids were to go off to college, or maybe they have another kid and they gotta do they need another bedroom. There's all different types of um things to look at for why somebody would be more likely to sell. And so we were able to just kind of start to just bracket that out a little bit. And then we'd start reaching out to those people, under the guise of, hey, are you interested in selling? Like, there's high demand in your neighborhood, type of a thing. And we'd always drop a link in there, like, hey, if you want to see what your home's worth and what things are trading for around the neighborhood, like, here you go. And so basically we found that if someone was willing to click and kind of, they'd have to enter their information, but they'd get the home valuation. And this stuff's a lot more prevalent now, but this is before, like, Zillow had their Zestimate tool even, right? So, like, you
Mhm.
can just go on and be like, what's my home? I mean, so people were really interested. Um, so yeah, and then we figured when someone had the intent to do that, there was a good chance they might want to sell. And so those leads started to work for him. Um, and then it was like, his brother was also sort of his partner in the real estate game,
Mhm.
and they knew some people. They were at Keller Williams. They knew some people that were, pretty big hitters at Keller Williams, and it was like, hey, do you all want to try this? And some of them tried it, and one person who's arguably one of the largest influencers in the entire real estate world tried it and loved it, and was like, well, I mean, you guys got to open this up for other people. And so we figured out, okay, we could sell these leads and generate them, and then, we weren't expecting much, like, maybe we'll get another couple of people on this. And this guy had started a really large online community, of realtors. And he basically did a post about it. And we got 300 people who were interested in trying it or wanted a demo of the product. And that's where it was like, okay, well, we have to figure out how to generate these leads at scale, which was a really big challenge. But that was like the first time, like, I'd always struggled to try to get something to work and to get, people to really buy it. And I think in this case, it was like, okay, this was working and got in the hands of the right person. They pushed it, and it was like, okay, you know, this, like, we've got a lot of customers. We just got to deliver a product here. And that's where, I went and kind of locked myself in a room for 2 months and figured out a way to serve all those customers. So that's that's kind of how Lead Faucet got going.
That's an amazing story. I like to ask people, like, looking back on your life, and if we just use this timeline at that moment in your life, looking back, was the size of the mountain you had to climb did it feel any different to you when you were doing the hands for others? Did I get that right? Hands for others.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the way that felt to you, and I'm just curious about the comparison of the emotional size of the challenge. So that moment when you were conceiving of the idea, and then you put that together, raised the money, had the board, et cetera, with Hands for Others, and then you think about the situation you have with Lead Faucet. Did it feel similarly? Did it feel similar in terms of like the magnitude of the challenge, or was it just different?
It was just different. I think there wasn't a lot of pressure at Hands for Others. It was more of like, that's going to go kind of wherever I would want to take it or wherever I'm going to put into it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we could have just raised 25 grand for that community and been like, great. Instead, it was like, hey, there's this interesting idea. Let's try and get other people involved. But I could put as much or as little time as I wanted to into that. Of course, now when you have other people fundraising and reaching out, then I mean, yeah, you're going to have to put in the work. But it was more of like it felt more like a project. Like the stakes weren't super high. It didn't, there wasn't a lot of pressure around it. I think the Lead Faucet, it was one like, okay, like um, I basically have, I I have no money. This is, I got to pay my bills. So there's that type of pressure, if you will. Um, and there's also the pressure of, okay, like this is one of those moments that can really change your life if you deliver on it.
Hmm.
Um, but I mean, as we talked about sort of my superpower earlier, like those are my absolute favorite things when it's like it's so clear, like this is the clear problem we have to solve.
Yeah.
Most people look at it, say it's impossible. Um, those are the most fun times in my life is when I have to take on something that seems so incredibly daunting and impossible, and I can just focus my time and energy in it and just make it happen. So I think for me, like I was like, great, I know I can figure out a way to make this happen.
Mm.
I had spent plenty of time on projects before where you build something and you feel like people are going to buy it. And I had my priorities backwards a little bit as an entrepreneur early. But this was like the one thing I was waiting for. Like, okay, great. We have the validation. We have the customers. It's
The
like we just have
demand.
to deliver the product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
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 I was
were these leads that people came in and said, "I have interest in you, so I'm waiting to see if you can scale," or was it sort of the thing where you're like, "I'll take your money and I'm gonna build it as the plane is flying?"
no, it was more of like they signed a so basically we demoed and they would sign a contract,
Mhm.
but we'd have to deliver the leads. So like they had a contract would say we'll pay up to X amount of leads, X amount of dollars per leads, and you start doing the math. It's like this could be six figures a month overnight type of a thing. And so it's more of like the pressure was on like, great, these people are bought in. Granted,
Mm.
these aren't like 3-year contracts. A lot of them, we started. You start month to month and you go quarterly, and then we kind of ended up in that quarterly to 6 month type of a range. But then it's like you have to deliver the leads, so that's where that's where the pressure kind of came from because we charged sort of per lead at that point in time.
So what did you learn about, having more of the business mind and you not having, like the traditional schooling in the tech side? Did you find yourself like, what was the process of getting the technical solution built? Was that a matter of going and finding a CTO, or did you just try to lead a development team yourself to build that product? How did that work?
Yeah, so I was. This was not a crazy complicated technical project. I mean, like so the hardest part was actually building the email infrastructure to send out like, 100,000 emails in a day and get in people's inboxes, if you will,
Okay.
to try and generate the leads. Cause that's what it was. The data would dictate who gets an email and when. That was the hardest. But that's less of a technical problem, more of a strategic problem of like,
Mm.
how do you make that happen? But yeah, we had different, I worked with a number of different developers that I found. It was kind of Freelancer was the site at the time. Upwork was
Yeah.
really new,
Yep.
but like Freelancer was the one. So I worked with a bunch of different developers there. I mean, there was a little bit of an interface we had where we can say, this person gets leads in this zip code, and they want this quantity of leads. We have an idea of how many kind of emails we need to send or how much, and then And then I could kind of splice up a lot of the database just using Excel and macros and stuff and kind of load it into the software. So it wasn't like this really big app that people had, were on and doing all the time. And so, um, I think from that I learned like you can be really hacky, and as long as the end product and what people are expecting is delivered, like that's really what matters. Like you don't need to
Mm.
go spend $1 million to do this. Like, I mean, I did it and we paid, like, it was like 10 grand to take that product to market. Right. I mean, and, we were profitable day one. And that was sort of my early entrepreneurial experience, and kind of the next, venture after that. I mean, Spark Talk as well. But, um, that was always my experience, is like, you build you see what, you figure out if there's demand and you build a product, and it's really not that hard, and you do it, pretty cheap, and you kind of roll with it. I think then, as I, have learned in ADM, and originally we were Daily Eye, we rebranded to ADM. Um, early on, we had some, building like a CRM end-to-end solution, which is what we are. That's a much bigger technical endeavor. And, the architecture and the scalability and stability of the platform matters a lot more. And so I think that mindset of sort of just, hey, let's find the demand, build something, bring it to the market, has done really well for me. But at the same time, I think I've learned on the flip side that, okay, you got to make the right architecture choices to really have software that can scale and can work with enterprises and things like that. So I think there was some speed bumps early on in this endeavor. We're fine now, but I think that mindset definitely, probably held us back a little bit on kind of the Daily Eye ADM front.
And so you mentioned earlier with Lead Faucet that did you sell the company?
Yeah, there's like a small brokerage that ended up acquiring it. I think what ended up happening there, and and I have a lot of thoughts on starting a company and finding kind of the right co-founders and whatnot. I think, selling leads is a challenging business because you're always going to get people that complain
Hmm.
about lead quality,
Yeah.
and especially with the audience like realtors. And this is nothing against realtors. I think it's just general human nature, but for whatever reason, I think realtors try a lot of these different products and get pitched on them, so they're hypersensitive.
Hmm.
But we had a customer where his first month, I think he got like 15 leads. I think we were charging him $20 a lead. One of them he got a listing off of, which he closed. The other one he got a listing, and then in his state he was able then to represent them as the buyers. So it's called double ending a transaction, where
Right.
you
Double
sell the home,
dipping.
get the commission.
Yeah.
Exactly. So $300, he probably, I don't know. I mean, he made 10 grand, I want to say. Um, the next 2 months after that, he had a couple of good leads he was nurturing, but no listings, and he canceled. So it's and it's like, um, and I remember it was like almost month 3, and then month 3, and I'm thinking like we're building our testimonials out. I remember this guy, and I'm not gonna say his name, but like I remember his name. But it's like I'm reaching out, like, hey, you want to be a testimonial for us? Thinking like, dude, you've paid for your lead faucet leads for the next, I mean, I don't know, 4 years in month 1. Um, and he was like, no.
Oh, wow.
So that's when I was like, you know what? This is going to be a tough, I mean, it's that whole thing. Like, how many customers can you get in? How big is your market, and how sticky is the product? I realized it's going to be really hard to make this product super sticky. But the market's huge. There's, 500,000 realtors out there. But also just, my sort of co-founders of that venture, they had a good and successful real estate business, and um, they didn't want, I think they loved the idea of the startup and these things, but the idea of, maybe having to raise money to scale out, the technology, or the infrastructure of the team, or things like that, I think, was just something that they really didn't want to do.
Hmm.
And so I think that's where I saw, okay, look, like, let's try and, rather than this blowing up, um, or us getting to a point where we, because we have to keep going, getting more customers. Let's try and find a sort of strategic home for this, and that's what we were able to ultimately do.
Okay, so that was such a well told story. I followed it completely. So as you're sort of transitioning, you're seeing the deal's going to close. Are you already on to the next thing? And did this show you something about real estate that gave you a particular view that other people didn't have, where there was opportunity you saw others didn't? And did you start the next thing right away, or did you take some time off? What happened there?
No, well, so my wife and I, we moved from Southern California out to Colorado. Kind of after that, just because we had some flexibility, um, and I was on to the next thing, which was sort of Spark Talk, which was sort of automation software, kind of working with kind of like a CRM light with automation software around, with sort of email and LinkedIn and there's a lot that Spark Talk could do, but I was already on to that. We already had a prototype, and um, I had somebody that had kind of helped start that with me as well, and so we were selling it into realtors like as like a recruiting tool or things like that, but also selling it more broadly out into the market. And so we were, I had put a little bit of money into getting that off the ground, and we were off to the races there. So I didn't take any time off. I think the lead faucet thing it was quick. I mean, it was like a year in end to end,
Hmm.
and I think a lot of times it usually doesn't work that way. Normally, it's a 5 to 10 year thing, and it's so you end up you need some time to kind of relax and go to the next thing, right? Like I expect that to be the case with ADM. It's there's I don't know if it's another 2 years or 5 years, but after I expected that I'm definitely gonna want to take some time off um after ADM. But Lead Faucet was quick, and I was amped and ready for the next thing.
Well, you made a comment about you having a strong perspective about choosing co-founders. I sense that there were misaligned priorities in terms of maybe did you just understand your perspective kind of at the time of choosing to do a strategic exit? Were you of the mindset where let's keep pushing on this problem and figuring out how to scale it? And they were like, no, we don't really want to do that. Let's be acquired and do something. I don't know, just get an exit. Um, was there a lesson in there about the way that you went about putting that team together, and did that influence the way you put the Spark Talk group together?
It didn't, and it didn't. I think so. I've worked with different co-founders, and I would say there's been three major kind of groups of co-founders I've worked with. And so I think so what I've learned is you have to be aligned around your mission and goal, if you
Mhm.
will, number one. And there has to be radical self-awareness and objectivity around the business. Like what's best for the business. I mean, you have to be willing to say, if I'm getting in the way of the business, then I, you know, I mean, then I gotta leave. Or I mean, you just have. I mean, if you can't put the business first, it's gonna lead to conflict because if one
Right.
person's thinking what's best for the business and you're making an argument for why I just don't want to leave this thing. I mean, it's not objective, and so I would say that the first sort of co-founders I had, I think it was we were misaligned on the mission, and I wanted to build something really big. I think they wanted to build something that would produce a lot of cash flow
Mhm.
and also would, from like a reputation standpoint, it was like would maybe put them in prominent circles within the real estate community. Um, and unfortunately, I don't think there was a lot of self awareness or objectivity, and so they were fine with me raising money and running with it. It just I wasn't going to get any more equity for it, and so then it's like, well, why would I do that? You
Right.
know? Um, and so, and that's where it's like, let's find a home for this because, we're really at an impasse here. Like
Mm.
I'm not going to try and take this and scale it and, and, not have a majority stake in this company. And so I think there's that. I think in other co-founders that I worked with who didn't end up working out, there was a massive alignment on the mission and a lack of like kind of self-awareness, if you will, where it's like maybe their perception of their abilities was far and how they were adding value was far greater than what it really was. And
Mm.
so, to kind of talk about, well, this is how you can add value to the business. If you can just do this really well, this is your superpower. Um, it was like that was not what they wanted, and they were not going to do what was best for the business. And so, that led to challenge there. I think the person I ended up starting Spark Talk with, and he's our chief strategy officer at Aidium. We've always had both. We've been aligned on the mission, and we've been able to have really hard conversations where he's called me out and I've called him out. And we've always looked at it from the standpoint of what's best for the business and what do we need to do. And because of that, we've had plenty of ups and downs, but we've always found a way. And I've made it through. So I think if you get those two things right, if you get the alignment and the self awareness, subjectivity piece right, um, I think co-founder relationships are, you know, some of those relationships you can have. But if you don't get those things right, it's a ticking time bomb. And the unfortunate piece is it's really, I think you can test the alignment piece before, but the objectivity piece, you can really only battle test that so much before getting into battle. And I think that's a tough one to
Hmm.
find.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. So you were doing Spark Talk, which was sort of a lighter CRM with some automation for email, LinkedIn, and so forth. CRM, and it was primarily targeting the real estate world. So you were still dabbling in that, but you were experimenting. What would it look like to go outside of that particular industry to scale that?
Correct. And that was where kind of, next co-founder came to the picture, approached me and said, "Hey, look, like let's, what about if we build a CRM um, for mortgage?" And at first I was like, "This, I mean, no, because I mean, doesn't Salesforce exist? Doesn't HubSpot exist? I mean, like this is probably a solved problem." And so I started to do a lot of diligence around it and understood that okay, this is actually um, a really this is a real big problem in the sense that this technology was built 10, 15 years ago. People were trying to use 4 or 5 different systems just to put together a simple workflow. um, there was a lot of opportunity to not only to do good by facilitating just the successful real estate transactions, uh, but I mean they're just this was not a solved problem, so to speak. And so I'm making a story really, really short, but the idea was great. Let's do this, and we've kind of marketed it early and still do to an extent as a CRM. We really always thought of ourselves as that automation engine, end-to-end solution, like automating the entire process. The minute that there's a lead or someone's interested in getting a mortgage or buying a house, all the way through the sort of transaction piece to the client for life type of piece. We've always seen ourselves that way, but um, it just made a lot of sense. And so at that point, I was continuing to work with Spark Talk and also took on this endeavor of looking to build. It was a daily AI is what we called ourselves initially, if you will. Um,
And it was da- it
and
was da-
that's
it was daily AI was the AI piece emphasized there for automation.
um, We were originally daily CRM. The idea, the best CRM is the one that you use so you log in daily.
Yeah.
It turns out that I actually don't believe in concept anymore. But that was the initial one, and then there was sort of the AI wave. We wanted to do a lot with AI, and just in the sense of so at Spark Talk we were doing lead scoring and things like that. And I thought that there would be an opportunity to do like a lot of stuff with AI around nurture. So basically your sort of past customers, can we leverage AI to maybe start to have conversations with people or convert leads? I think that was like the path we were on pretty early on. And but I think we ultimately ended up finding more of a market pull just on like the software side, maybe less so of the AI side. I think there's also just a lot of compliance in the world of mortgage and banks. And so I think there was a lot of barriers on the AI side, and the kind of end-to-end solution was getting a lot of traction. So over time, the AI became less and less of a priority. And then ultimately we've rebranded into Aidium. So not to say that there isn't any AI components to what we're doing, but it just yeah, you kind of end up doubling, tripling down on what's working, and not putting a lot of resources into the stuff that is a little questionable. So I think that's what happened with the AI portion.
And so you slowly just evolved into putting more and more time into daily AI, or what became Aidium. It was sort of a natural transition. Is that it was sort of an extension off of, sounds like, what you were building from a CRM perspective for Spark Talk.
Yeah, I'd say it different, but yeah, I mean, um, yeah, definitely different project, but I mean, certainly in some overlap for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah.
I know you decided to make an acquisition. Are you open to talking about sort of the how that all
hmm
came about
Yeah.
and what the strategic play was there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're still daily AI, and we did acquire Whiteboard CRM. And the way I look at it is there's sort of two thoughts behind that. I think for us at Daily AI are, and I think we're the initial focus was really that power user, if you will. So someone that when you look at an independent mortgage bank or a bank, if you will, you kind of have different tiers. You have your enterprise, which is your C-suite, your CEO, your chief technical officer, marketing, all that fun stuff, right? And they're looking to invest in technology to roll it out to their sales team, which is really the loan officer. Or, the same might be in a real estate brokerage, right? The realtors are kind of the sales team, if you will. Um, and then under that, you have like the branch level and then it goes team, kind of the loan officer. So a bank might have 100 loan officers. There might be 20 in branch A, 30 in branch B, and there might be a couple of teams, and a team might just be one loan officer. It might be a couple loan officers plus an assistant and a marketing assistant and a processor. I mean, so, that's kind of how the dynamic works. And what typically happens is the branch managers or the high producing teams are very sophisticated, and they want to invest in tech to do more loans, save time, convert more leads. And so initially we were targeting them, and they really liked what we were doing. It was something that didn't really exist in the market. Um, and so we found a lot of traction there. And over time have begun to go more and more upmarket to the enterprise, if you will.
Mhm.
But I think on the whiteboard side, they had some functionality around kind of like automations and if then logic workflow building that we liked, that we wanted to kind of bring in. But it was also an opportunity just kind of came up where I think the person who started Whiteboard saw something very similar to us, which was he was a top producing um, regional regional director at a large independent mortgage bank, realized there's no good technology, went and built something for his region, and the people loved it, and he thought, let's build a software company around it. And it's one of those things where he had never really built a software company before, so maybe were some challenges with the software scaling, um and also and couldn't really quite go up market enough to make it super viable. So, he's an extremely successful guy, and, was made a lot of money through all the refinances and stuff like that happened in 21, 2020, 2021 and everything. And so I think he just had never really made money off a whiteboard and said, if I can kind of find a home for this and for our customers, I'll do it. And so we were able to get it for stock, and that gave kind of whiteboard and their team and investors a win. And there was some technology we were able to get, um, and we were able to kind of get their customer base to also help us grow. So, I think it's one of those things that was a win-win. I mean, in hindsight, I mean, we had really explosive growth in 2022. So I think if I had known that, I probably wouldn't have done the acquisition. But at the time, you say, look, this can add a substantial amount of revenue. And there's some cool stuff technically, and it's not crazy expensive. It sort of made sense. That was the logic behind it.
So as a founder looking at the different ways to finance your company, you've chosen to go the venture capital route, right?
With
With the
with Aidium,
with
yes,
Aidium.
everything up until then had, yeah. I mean, we had never really. We were basically profitable day one.
And so walk me through the decision-making process as to you're looking out at your opportunity to grow, to build something, to acquire customers, and you're like, we have certain goals and objectives we want to hit in certain timelines, and we need money to do that. Um, what was that process like for you? Was that your first time like raising traditional, not traditional,
Hmm.
raising venture funding?
Yeah. So I think that there's a saying, and I'm not sure how I I mean, I've spent very limited amount of time in Silicon Valley. So if someone's in Silicon Valley and they haven't heard the saying, then like excuse me, but I know there's a saying, that said basically you can be rich or you can be king. Um, the idea being is if you're king, you have businesses that you own that are profitable, that throw off a lot of cash flow, and you have total flexibility. Like you're the owner, you own it all, you can do whatever the hell you want. Um, and we all know people that have those businesses. They take a long time to build, but eventually they're profitable and you're making money, and those people are off surfing in Bali or doing whatever, right? And that's more of the king route, if you will. Um, and the more kind of you want to be rich route is more of we have something that's working. Let's pour gasoline and see how big this thing can go and how fast we can go. And if it ends up going really well, then yeah, you're gonna make a really really big check. You're just also gonna be a slave, so to speak, to that mission and company until you get to that outcome. And the outcome might fail because when you throw gasoline on fires, I mean, it's not always great. I mean, sometimes stuff breaks and it's hard. And so, um, but the saying is you can't be both. Like you gotta kind of pick a route. So I with Lead Faucet and with Spark Talk, I had picked that king route in essence, which is these businesses they're throwing off good cash flow. I can kind of, even though I'm fairly obsessive, so I still was working ridiculous amounts of hours. Um, you could see a path to where, okay, I can make a really good living. Maybe someone's going to buy this business one day, but and it's growing, but it's not exponential growth, and I can also have the flexibility to go ski 30 days in a year or something like that, right? And so I think that was originally what I was building towards. And then kind of going with daily AI, we started to experience exponential growth where it's a lot different when you have a business and there's 4 or 5 people. You're doing, let's say, $50,000 in revenue in a month. Both founders can make 10 grand a month. The business is profitable and you're trying to grow to, maybe 60, 70 grand over the next, 6 months or 12. I mean, obviously you're trying to push it faster, but I mean, it's incremental.
Incremental. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. It's more linear.
Mhm.
So it's a lot different than when you have a business which is at zero revenue, and then you look around and 3 months later you're at $1 million, and then a year later you're at $4 million, and it's like that exponential growth. I mean, it just breaks things. Like businesses are not meant to really grow exponentially, if you will, and it introduces new sets of problems, and it adds a lot of pressure to existing problems because you got to solve them fast, and like you got to plug holes in the ship real fast because the water starts to pour in a lot faster.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's where I realized we gotta hire, we gotta make hires to handle a lot of this stuff. At that point, like I was really I was sort of the account manager working with our biggest customers. I was overseeing the technology side. I was overseeing the finance side. I would help, close our bigger. I mean, it just kind of, everything, right? You're wearing a lot of hats, and it's like, well, that can work with 2 customers. We're implementing 2 customers, but bigger customers. But if you have 10 or 20, it's just not going to work. And so that's where you start to hire, and you start to hire people to also maybe oversee departments, and you start to kind of build that org chart. And when you do that, like you're making big investments, and you realize that like we're and you start to get to a point where to kind of build out that infrastructure, you can start to burn cash or lose money. And so we're fortunate. A lot of our early customers at Daily I liked the product and were flush because of the refinance boom and wanted to invest. And so we sort of got a lot of strategic partners as early investors putting in money, and we've sort of been on that path ever since, where you're losing money every month, but the growth is more exponential, if you will. Um, and because of that, it's like, okay, we're at a point now where we need a bigger check. Like, I can't just go get a $500,000 check and all is good, right? I mean, there's kind of a saying and a metric that is really, really important called burn multiple, which means basically how much are you growing in annual contract value versus how much money are you losing. So like, and I mean, ideally you want to be around 1 or below 1. So if you grow by an annual contract value of $1 million and you lose $1 million, that same, um, then that burn multiple is 1. And the idea being is because this is a software product, most of those people are going to be around for year 2 and 3. So do you spend $1 to make $5 all day long, right? I mean, that's the math, and that's why VCs do really well and they fund companies that lose money. And so, for us, we've always tried to keep our burn really low. But when you're adding millions of dollars in annual recurring revenue, you got to raise millions of dollars, even with a good burn multiple. So that's where we had to go raise our Series A, and it was kind of tough. It was tough timing. We were also, this was sort of, which was kind of fall of 2022. There's a lot of people that wanted to buy us. That product was great. It was popping off. I mean, there's a lot of people that threw term sheets at us to buy the company for obscene valuations, and we thought we had a lot of room to grow. But it's like, if you buy a car for $1,000 and someone says, "Hey, here's 10 grand, can I have that car?" I mean, you could love that car as much as you want. You're still going to sell it. And so I think for us, we were entertaining those opportunities, and, then rates went up, market changed, and, we ended up raising capital Q1 of 2023, which was the hardest time to raise since 2008. So it was really interesting how quickly things turned, but it went from, okay, maybe we're going to, be an add-on to one of these big acquisitions, make a lot of money, have equity, continue to learn and grow this thing, to, okay, those options are no longer viable, and we got to raise money, or we're not going to be able to keep the lights on at a certain point, or we're going to have to make really big cuts. And so that was a very challenging, that was, honestly, probably the most challenging thing I've ever done. So my wife and I also had our first kid at that time. There's some challenges with my wife's health. She had to have a couple surgeries. I mean, so that was really tough, but we were able to get it done. And that kind of goes back to my the superpower, was able to find a way there. But but also, like, during that time period, I'm looking back on it now, and there was things that fell through the cracks that shouldn't have fallen through the cracks, like, billing some of our customers and stuff. I mean, which, we can laugh about now, but it's like you look back on it. So that's the superpower in the shadow side, full display for sure. And, fall of 2022.
Well, so you raised your Series A early 2023, right? You've accelerated, it sounds like, plans for building particular aspects to your product that would have come into play end of 2024 that are now January 2024, right? So there's been just a massive need to shift based on what you're seeing in the market, and the what's really driving that acceleration for you. What's underneath that? Is it capturing opportunity? Are there other demands that require that acceleration versus what else you could have done to stretch it out over time?
Yeah, I think I think fundamentally it goes back to that. It goes back to the kind of the A versus the B product, but the concept of push and pull. I think in a good, what we experienced was a lot of push factors. So people they wouldn't like their current platform, or the demand for loans was so high they had to figure out ways to automate more, right? Or they had a bunch of money, so they wanted to invest new. Those are all push factors that push people to us.
Right.
When those push factors go away, you got to figure out ways to pull people in. And so, the new sort of stuff we're launching in January, it has to do with like a data warehouse solution, and, and a reporting application and things like that, which might sound basic to some, but I mean, those are not solved problems in our industry as well. Where if you ask a loan officer, what is the metrics of your sales funnel? Like for every leads you get, loans do you, how many applications do you convert? How many loans do you fund? They don't know. The enterprise doesn't know either. And it's just because there's a lot of disparate systems that were built in 2005 that have SOAP or XML APIs. For those of you that aren't, those who aren't technical, that's like, um, it's basically like trying to build. It'd be like, think about, floppy disks versus CDs versus now everything's on the cloud. Like we're
Hmm.
talking floppy disk type of stuff here, right? That you're having to work with. And so turns out it's really hard to integrate with those systems and bring it all into one spot. I mean, when you're doing a loan, you kind of get to know everything about people. So the software that people use to underwrite loans, I mean, there's 6,000 data points in there. So how do you find which ones are useful, combine them and with other data sources? It's a really big challenge that very few companies have actually solved. Um, and so for us, like that's why we're building these products because people need that. They need to take all their data, get into one place, and they need to be able to accurately report around it. And this is one of the main reasons why, it didn't happen to many, but some mortgage companies went out of business is because they had all this demand and they hired for it. The demand fell off a cliff. So they lost a bunch of money and the demand never came back. And if they had accurate reporting to show like
Hmm.
you've got 50 people too many, I mean, you got a staff of 50 people too many to underwrite these loans, or these loan officers are losing money because, you got to pay for their health insurance and things like that. They haven't done a loan in 3 months. If they were able to kind of make those adjustments, they would have survived and they had no reporting or no insights. And, when your CFO is putting those numbers together, it's a lagging indicator. You're looking at, oh, shoot, 3 months ago was really bad. And you're not
Yeah.
looking at like this month's going to be real bad. Um, so it's a big problem. And, it's always something we've seen. It's just, where we see this as a pull factor. So maybe someone doesn't want to make the move for our core, I call it CRM product, but we bundle and package the reporting and the warehouse stuff. It's enough for them to make the move. So, um, I think that's why we've accelerated the timeline and are way ahead of schedule in a sense, on this product.
Well, I want to talk about how you spend a busy week, right? So when you think about the different categories of where you're currently focusing your time and energy, and the percentage of each of those buckets, like what if you're going through a really busy, I mean, I'm sure it's project based a lot of times, if you're pushing out products versus working on some other aspect of the business. How do you kind of break down, like, I'm curious how involved in marketing you are, how involved in sales you are, those types of things, and what lessons might have been learned at removing yourself from and hiring people that are going to be functionally able to lead and grow those departments. How does that kind of factor in today with the state of the business?
Yeah, great question. I think that so a founder should not remove themselves from these aspects of the business until there's clearly a repeatable process that's demonstrable.
Uh-huh.
So until you've figured out and you've implemented 10 customers, until you've sold, and there's different founders, some are technical, some are more on the sales side or, customer facing, but so wherever you are, but if you're like the founder that's doing the sales, you sell 10 people and then you hire a sales rep to then go out and do the same thing, if you will. And it seems so obvious, but what does every founder, including myself, do? You sell some people like, oh shit, this is working. You then go and hire a sales manager or leader or director of sales to then build a sales team. And it never works out with that first director of sales because they're coming in trying to build a team and operationalize stuff when really you should be hiring 2 or 3 sales reps. They're selling, you're teaching them how to sell exactly how they should, and it's working. Then you bring in the director to manage that team. But it's hard when you have so much stuff on your plate and it's like, oh, great, this person's been a sales leader at 3 companies. Let's bring this person in. They're for sure going to figure it out. And the reality is that most of the time they don't, right? They're looking to say, they're looking to you. Like, okay, what do we do here, right? And how do we sell this? And um, so I think, to make a long story short, it's until you feel really good about passing it off and it's in a good spot, like you definitely shouldn't delegate. And I've learned that the hard way kind of on the sales front. I think I've learned that the hard way on the product and engineering front, where you feel like it's in a pretty good spot, but the product isn't where you want it to be and it's ever evolving. Like, I mean, you have to stay in the weeds with it and be, and so there's been points where I've removed myself too much from that. Um, and so I think, like, I've certainly made those mistakes. I've learned to try and kind of, I've had to unwind some of those mistakes. And, now I try to just, to kind of mitigate that, where it's like, if we're, so on the product side, I think there's a great article. I think it's by Ben Horowitz with kind of
Hmm.
Andreessen Horowitz,
Hmm.
VC, and basically it's a great article where it says, like, if you're more product inclined as a CEO or a founder, write everything down so it's really clear. Because what's going to happen is you're going to talk to your head of product and say, this is what we need to do, this is what I care about, and then they're going to internalize that, put their own spin on that, and it becomes a game of telephone. Then they're telling it to the head of engineering and the engineers and everyone, and then and then it's like, well, this is like, two standard deviations away from what I wanted. So, you just write it down, be very clear. These are the things that we care about. These are the problems that we're solving. You're going to be judged based on these things. And I mean, I hate to say it, but it's like, these are things that I've just started to, like, I mean, this year even. And it's changed. It changed everything to an extent. Um, but it's like, you got to be really clear when you're taking yourself out of the weeds, and you have to facilitate a culture, um, of candor. Candor is one of our core values at Aidium, but it's like, if something isn't going well, I mean, yeah, I mean, like, look, if it's a really small contract, then maybe try and figure it out. But if it's a really big contract and we got to figure out a way to make them happy or something like that, or someone wants to build a bunch of custom stuff for them, like, let's talk about it. I mean, let's not spend 3 hours talking about it, but let's spend 30 minutes and let's discuss it. And um, so I do kind of weekly one-on-ones with everyone on the leadership team, and it's basically around those topics, like, are we tracking to our goals? But, like, what are things that came up that you're not maybe sure about, and you want to get my take on, if you will. So I think my tendency has been to be more of that, I'm on to the next problem. So I'm a little too high level, unless it's the problem I'm focused on, then I'm right there in the weeds. and um and I think it's not, that's not the best way to manage a group. Um and and what that leads to is you're too high level on some stuff, so it's not going well, and then you're too granular on other stuff. So you're maybe overcomplicating it, and then you maybe figure out you solve problem A and B, but because you're too high level on C, D, and E, then marketing's going in the wrong direction, or sales didn't close, big deal or whatever. And so for me, I've had to just, kind of meet in the middle a little bit, where it's, I'm not crazy high level. Like, we're setting very clear goals and expectations and directions for every department every quarter, if you will. But then we've introduced what I call a sprint concept. So it's like, we have our kind of quarterly goals and objectives, but we've introduced sprints where every 2 weeks we can be a little bit more nimble, a little more entrepreneurial, where it's like, this is an issue for the company. This is something we can fix in the next 2 weeks. Let's let let's let's make that a sprint for this department to get done. So that's where you can get, it's kind of the direction, but then it can be a little bit more in the weeds, if you will. And then, so I would say that's where I spend my time, with every department. And then there's a lot of crossover with what maybe some of the key challenges we're seeing, or key sprint items that, I have my own sprint items. And right now they're more around the growth stuff, but there's been some stuff around the warehousing and the reporting product and stuff. And so, I have to be held accountable by the leadership team as well. So whatever sprint items I have to do, or whatever my quarterly goals are, and I need to work with other departments, then I'm going to work with other departments to make sure those get done. So I'd say right now there's some stuff that I've focused on heavily on the product, and then we hired a head of finance, so it's transitioning a lot of that type of stuff. So those have been some quarterly goals, and then also like around growth, of course, like that's sort of the name of the game. And so um, you know, key relationships, key strategic partners, growth oriented activities, big deals. Like, yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
I'm all I'm all hands on deck to help with those things as needed.
So when you look back on building a prototype, which I guess was sort of a crossover from Spark Talk to, Daily AI, which then turned into Aidium. Looking back on what you've gone through and what you're focused on today in terms of targeting particular customer segments, can you look back and say that you made the right decisions on the right size and, product strategy, or have you had to make major pivots? I'm not sure what the time frame to put this inside of like a container, but I'm curious, how did you go about identifying the way to do it? And looking back, had you done it differently, would you give yourself advice now, looking back on how you went to market originally versus what you're doing now? Is there advice you'd give to yourself back then, or was it just an iterative process that had to kind of go the way it went, and it's aligned with what you're doing today?
There's a lot of advice I would give to myself if I went back in time. Um, and I'm very critical of myself just by nature, but I think that some of these might sound obvious or t- to to your listeners, but I think the first thing is like, you know, you really gotta you really gotta figure out like what's the market, right? So there's X amount of people that might want, that are capable of using this software. Okay, well, what are the segments in this group? Like, okay, so you have the enterprise, you have the power user, then you have the loan officer that's new to the business, or the person that's been in the business forever but uses Excel.
Mhm.
Those are very different, uh, user segments that have different needs, if you will. And so we found a natural home with the power users. It just turns out that's about 10% of the market, right?
Uh,
So you have this really nice, big addressable market, and you realize, okay, well, there's actually not a lot of these people. And then you start getting people who sign up that are maybe not the power user types, and they are like, well, I want to be like that power user, and they're saying they like Aidium, and then they sign up, and it's like, well, I'm not going to put in the work or do anything the power user does, which is obviously why they're not the power user, right? I mean, it makes logical sense. Like, otherwise they would be. It's like saying I want to be the top salesperson at my company. It's like, and I've been trying for 5 years and I'm not even in the top 100. It's like, okay, well, there's probably a reason for that. Um, and so their expectations and what we needed to do and what the product needed to look like for them to be happy was dramatically different. And so I think what happened is we got a lot of confirmation bias early on
mm,
with power users and early adopting enterprises. Um, and it's not like we didn't have a big N or like a big group of users and customers that were giving us feedback. It's just they were all pretty much the same persona. So we got really good at building to that, and
which
those
was
people are
which
really happy.
which wasn't representative of the greater TAM, essentially?
Exactly, like early adopting enterprises and power users,
Right.
and the TAM is, I mean, like basically we hadn't mapped out our strategy and how do we cross the chasm, which is,
Uh-huh,
for those of you who haven't
uh-huh.
read Crossing the Chasm, it's
Yeah,
that book of how do you go from early adopters to,
yeah.
those that aren't early adopters are like mid majority, late majority laggards.
Mhm.
It turns out this industry is full of late majority and laggards. And so we were a little behind in terms of figuring out how do we cross the chasm and get to them. And so I think for us, that's been the learning is like you have to look at the whole market and you have to, just because something's working for an early adopter, like go talk to 10 people that aren't early adopters, you know? Um, so you at least have it in mind. And, part of that is, we rebranded from Daily Eye to Aidium, new brand, new colors to kind of, but also like we did launch an updated iteration of the product, new look and feel, some new functionality. We changed some stuff on the back end, and kind of how we handle roles and permissions. And the reason being is just daily AI was doing great with the early adopters, but we were missing some compliance stuff. We were missing certain granular things that we would have never been able to cross the chasm and get to the late majority people with that product. So if we had identified that early on, we would have built the product in a way where that wouldn't have been a problem. But it took time for us to identify that. So we had to kind of go through that very expensive and annoying process of rebuilding parts that we shouldn't probably have had to rebuild, of our core product. So I think that's the big on the product side. I think that's the big thing is like get a big end, talk to everybody, understand the market really, really well. Don't get confirmation bias, if you will, when something's going well. And I also think just being a little bit more granular. This is something we've learned is like our customer journey, if you will. So like what's the happy path in essence is probably not the best term for it, but it's I mean, it's just kind of the term that's stuck internally. But from the moment a customer, looks at us on our site and talks to sales and then signs up and gets going, like what does that path look like? Like where they're happy and they're seeing value and they're not going to churn. And I mean, and also what are the things that maybe could take them off that happy path? Like, if they experience a big product bug or issue or have a really bad interaction with the support or something, like that could take them off. I mean, or who knows, but I think the key is just mapping that out. And in the happy path for like a very beginner user type is totally different than an advanced user type. And the happy path for a late majority enterprise is totally different than the happy path for an early adopting enterprise. And so I think that's what, I think just mapping that out, like what does success look like for these customers, and don't try and impose your views on them, educating people on, I mean, it's the whole concept of standard deviations, right? If someone's expecting X, don't try to give them D or Z. Like you can give them Y. You can give them Y all day long. If there's an X, you can give them Y, but you can't give them like F or G or something. And I think that's what happened to us. It's like, well, these power users are expecting X. We're delivering on X. You're saying you want to be a power user, so here's X. And if you don't want that, then you're being illogical. And it's like, well, they actually want D. So, like, you have to. It's not that we give them D, but you got to give them something in the middle. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And so I think we were too forceful, trying to force people. Again, a really good market, those people are like, well, whatever, we'll pay for it anyway and figure it out. In a tough market, it's like, I'm going to cut this thing because it's not giving me what I want. So I think it's just you have to leave your opinions and really have those conversations and let people beat you up a little bit. And it's, the customer might not be right. In fact, the customers actually probably are rarely right, but that's not the point of the saying. The point of the saying is like the customer decides when, to who they're going to part with their hard-earned money to. And they're going to tell you like, I'm going to buy for these reasons. And this is why I'll part with my money. And if you don't deliver on that and you say, well, actually it's not why you should have bought, you should have bought for these other reasons. You're not going to make them happy. So that's a hard lesson to learn, and one that I've learned.
Well, so you form a hypothesis about, okay, so you do the research on the TAM and you then go talk to a bunch of people, I suppose, that are sort of the early adopters, the different personas that would be users. You look at the different size of the organizations and try to map that to a pricing and product strategy, I suppose. How did you, because you're trying to get people to significantly, depending on the user, to change their daily workflows to come into the system that you are offering. How did you go about making a decision, and how did you iterate on enterprise, like large enterprise, medium enterprise, or more of like an SMB type, higher velocity, more transactional sales cycle? How did you kind of hone in on that? And what have you learned, like sort of where you're at today in terms of your target?
Yeah, great question. I think in general, that is a very big challenge because selling top down versus bottoms up
Hmm.
requires, almost like, I know people do it with like pods or something, and with an organization, you have like the idea being, do you really want someone that's implementing both enterprises and SMB or kind of mid market? The answer is probably not. You want someone to be really good at one of those categories. Same with sales.
Real
You want
quick.
someone to be really good. Go
Well,
ahead.
real quick. So when we talk about top down, that could mean a couple different things, right? So when you say top down or bottoms up, you're saying SMB, then go to mid market, then go to enterprise. Because it could also mean in an
Yep.
organization when you're selling, you start at the bottom of the user base and then you go up to the C suite, right? So we're talking in terms of just markets of smaller businesses, medium sized businesses, large organizations, right?
I'm talking within a logo, perhaps. So yeah, I'm talking market, right? So a top down would say we're going to go to the enterprise level and sell the whole bank. A bottoms up would say I'm going to go to the top producers at that bank. They're going to like it, and eventually we'll work our way to other producers at that bank, and then get into the C suite
Mm,
to sell the whole enterprise, if you will. Those are
got it.
different sales
Okay.
motions. Yeah.
Right. So land and expand
Yep.
versus top down. Okay. Got it. But
Yeah, and go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, I guess the question I was trying to get at is, did you have any early learnings that you realized you were lucky in your decision making when it came to we're gonna target certain organizations of a certain size that are gonna dictate our hitting our goals with our sales cycle, knowing that we can move it fast enough to kind of get the deals closed?
Yes, enterprise moves slow, especially in this space. It's very slow. Um, Teams and branches will move very quickly.
Mm,
Um, and so our sales cycle was super quick. And still is with a lot of those deals. It can be like a week and contracts out and signed. Enterprise, it's like, it could be 6 months or a year. In some cases. So yeah, I think we did. I think to make a long story short, what we got right and what we got lucky is we tackled the hardest part of the market first. Like
mm,
making the power user happy is really, really hard. And that's where our competitors have failed is they've done, they're okay-ish and they make kind of like the non-power users, um, like, yeah, that's not great, but it's like they don't hate them either. But the power users all go to different systems or go to us because our major competitors at the enterprise level are just don't have a compelling offering whatsoever. It's
mm.
shocking how far behind their products are actually, for that particular segment. So we tackled the harder part of the market first, but then you have to figure out how can we package this in a way where the non-advanced power user, like that beginner user, sees value and really likes it. And so I think that's the lucky thing is it's harder to build. It's easier. It's we built the harder part of it first, and then we had to figure out how do you package it for what's a lot easier. And we have way too much functionality for them. We just have to figure out a way to make sure that we can get them on that happy path, so to speak. Um, and so I think the way we went about it was actually was a better way to go about it, from that standpoint. We got a little bit lucky there where sales cycles were quick, and
Mhm.
because the power users typically were big producers, we could get into the banks and integrate with the banks. So I think we kind of fell into that, and that worked really well. And then we've had to work backwards to say, okay,
Mm.
how do we solve the rest of it? And the rest of it is very solvable, much easier problems to solve, and really not even technology related.
Huh.
To an extent, it's like, can we have great out of the box content? Can we have a lot of preset campaigns? Can we, you know, it's things like that, right? It's
Huh.
just a lot of perceived value. So it's stuff that isn't even necessarily product related to an extent that we've had to solve for. So
So
I think we got lucky that.
So it became a real competitive advantage, and also it made it really sticky, right? And the hardest part being handled first allowed for the traction to occur, to get you the integrations and the business case internally to get something
Hmm.
to be moving forward, and then you could just plug everybody else in along with good content, right?
For sure. Yeah, and also, so I think that, um yeah, I think that's exactly right. So I think from that perspective, um it's positioned us really, really well, if you will, to also win the enterprise market. We just have had to Um, we just have had to tweak some stuff along the way to make sure that the beginners feel happy and taken care of, if you will. Yeah.
So how much of a stress is managing like burn rate with, the cash in the bank, with the strategy, with the market dynamics changing? I mean, is that occupy I guess it depends on how much you have in the bank. And I guess it depends on your hiring plan. I mean, I'm so curious how someone in your position juggles that stress while staying maniacally focused on constantly reprioritizing coming into a new year. It just seems like a daunting
Yep.
task. You raised your Series A, so in my world, people are typically trying to get 18 to 24 months of cash runway based on their plan, right? And then you either meet or exceed or underperform or whatever. So you have a window where you have to execute and get results, and then otherwise you got to go raise again. So I generally understand that, but is there anything to the general public that could be shared
Yes.
as to how you manage that?
Yes, yes, for sure. So I think there's a couple buckets here, and they all relate to the stress level. I would say lesson number one, like I think having too much capital, way too much can be an issue because then you're thinking, well, um, I got to spend this, right? And you lose sort of the efficiency. And this
Mm,
is what we saw in 2021 or whatever. Like with a lot of startups, just they're raising so much money and they're so inefficient. Their burn multiples are 3 or 4. They're getting more money, and it's like, I mean, I don't know about that, but like to spend $4 to make $1, and is how viable of a business is that? It seems like that's a lot of people can do that. Like, you know what I mean? So, the product might not be that great, but like, so anyway, I think too much money is a challenge. But also like not. We had top tier metrics across the board. And I'm not saying this pat myself on the back. Like again, like we haven't touched on all my different failures, but like I'm just saying that sort of objectively. Like if you
yeah.
look at SaaS metrics, we had really high growth. We had phenomenal. Every category was top tier, and I was thinking like this is going to be easy to raise last fall. Um, and it was not. There was people. So many of these funds were like, we don't want to invest in property tech right now. We're not investing in mortgage, or we're not investing period right now. We're looking our womb. It was like,
Yeah.
it's like, are you kidding me? And so it was just timing. If it had been a year prior, we would have sent out a deck to 20 VCs and gotten probably 10 term sheets back in 2 days. Like honestly, that's how it would have worked. And but instead, I had to talk to hundreds of VCs and move things along and to finally get some opportunities. And we were lucky to even get opportunities. So it was timing really matters. And like, so don't assume that you can just, you know, you say, oh, I have a year of runway. I'll worry about that 9 months from now. The business is doing well. Like, no, like you should make sure that you've got a lot of opportunities lined up. So, but I think like as it relates to the core of your question on stress, so there's the alignment piece,
Hmm.
which I think is really key. So alignment takes a couple different shapes and sizes. You got to understand who your capital partner is and what they're expecting from you.
Hmm.
So there's different buckets of VCs. There's the bucket which is more of that like kind of portfolio theory, traditional VC, which says I'm going to make 40 bets in this fund.
Yep.
2 are going to be unicorns, and the rest I don't really care what happens to them.
Yeah.
They care, right? But it's like I'm going to make really, really, really big bets.
Yeah.
And you just have to understand that, like, you know, them putting in money at a $20 million valuation, you selling at 100 million, they 5x their money. They're like, they would rather take the risk of a company that is likely to fail, but if it succeeds, it's going to be $1 billion outcome,
Right.
right? So you just have to understand that, like, they are going to encourage you to grow and to either succeed or fail fast. Like, I mean, that's what they're going to do, and you're never going to be aligned. If you're like, well, look, I can build a great business and we can sell it for 100 million, and like that's a big win for everyone, life changing for me, our team, and if 5x for you, you're going to be fighting them because they're going to say, let's go raise more money and let's take this thing to 300 or 500,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And every VCs are different, but I think like, and there's a lot of VCs that play portfolio theory that are fantastic partners and will lean into that and be fine, like you can sell, but just, I mean, again, like the alignment piece matters a lot. So if you're working with a VC and you got a bunch of money in the bank and you're saying, hey, we're going to conserve cash, try to become profitable, slow down our growth, right? Not
Hmm.
burn like crazies to raise again in 12 months. And your VC is the kind of unicorn outcome type,
Uh-uh.
you're not going to be aligned with them, right? Um, and so for us, like I want to define VC that was more growth stage, if you will. So, because they're underwriting to those 3 to 5x returns. They're not underwriting to the 100x return.
Yeah.
It just becomes really hard to get to growth stage because you have to have a certain amount of revenue and you have to have a certain amount of, um, most growth stage funds won't touch you until you get to 5 million in recurring revenue and you have a lot of retention history because for them, any failure is a real bummer because they're trying to make 3 to 5x. Well, if you have half your companies get a 3x and half of them go out of business, you got a 1.5x. I mean, that math doesn't work, right?
Right.
Versus a bunch go out of business and one becomes Google. Now all of a sudden, you're given like a 50x on back to your as a VC to your limited partners who put money in. And so, um, so I do think that like that alignment piece is really key, and that's going to affect the pressure um, in different ways. And I think having a partner that is going to be supportive of how you're seeing things and there's alignment there, that's going to add to a lot less stress versus if you're fighting over that and you're not aligned, right? So I think that's number one. I do also think it's like from my perspective, um, I've always, again, my first businesses were the more bootstrapped route, if you will.
Hmm.
I always would like to see a line of sight to profitability where it's like, let's say all of our money in the bank disappeared tomorrow. Like just for whatever reason,
Silicon Valley
is there a
Bank.
path? Yeah, there you go. Yeah. That happens or we get who knows, right? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it won't happen, but like
Yeah.
the idea being is like, is there a path to profitability here? Like, can we actually, can I make necessary, cuts or on expenses or any person like, but can we have a core team and our product and stuff and we're still and we're like break even, we can make it happen. Um, and for me, always being able to like see that has been important. And I think what happens is you have a lot of these companies where it's like they're doing 5 million in revenue, but they're burning, you know, $20 million. It's like, well, how do you cut 15 million to be viable? I mean,
Yeah.
like you kind of can't. But if you're doing 5 million revenue and you're burning $8 or $9 million, yeah, you could probably see a scenario where if you got a team of 50, you go down to 25 or 30 and make it work. Um, so I think to me, that's just the health test of a business. And again, um, it starts with the alignment. Like for me, that's important to me. Like I need to be able to see the pathway to break even if something were to go really wrong. And um and I need to find a partner who also can see that, who's not going to say spend a lot more, burn a lot more, try to grow faster, but then you get yourself in a position where the business could fail and you can't get back to that break even point. So I think to make a long story short, yes, like having a burn is very stressful. You're losing money every single month. The burn doesn't always match the P&L,
Mhm.
right?
Uh-huh. Yep.
Because, the accounting works. It's like, oh, we on paper, we lost 200 grand, but it's like, oh, but our healthcare premium was due and that was 200 grand. So we lost 400 grand that month. Oh, shoot, oh, well,
Yeah.
like this big customer is behind 2 months in billing. Like, oh man, like we lost 500, but we said 200, like it's that whole thing. You're just like psychologically, it's challenging. And there's some months, of course, where you outperform that, whatever big contract comes in, pays up front. And so, yeah, I think for me, it is what it is. I don't love the burn. I think for me, the way I live with it is there's a path to that, um, profitability or, break even if something were to go really wrong. But everyone has different ways of dealing with that. Again, this is why I think having teams of co-founders is great because you can rely on each other for this stuff. Like I think to be on an executive team of a startup, you need to be able to handle the fact that the company's burning money. But as a founder, you're not going to go and really, you know, cry on
Hmm.
someone's shoulder in the exec team when you have a really bad month or something happens. But you will do that to a co-founder, and you need to find someone that you can help manage that stress with, because it is stressful. And if you're someone who thinks you don't get stressed out easily, like, it will sneak up on you and it will stress you out. And so I would say, find a way to manage it, and also figure out what your philosophy is, and then find a great capital partner that is aligned philosophically. If you do those things, I think it becomes a lot easier to manage.
Yeah, and we both have a fond perspective on the capital partner that, yeah, we have in common here. So,
Mhm.
yeah, good choice on that. When you look at this earlier point you made about the shortage of homes, and what we built this year, we need to do it for the next 30 years to catch up. That still kind of rings true in my head. So when you had to go through the shifts in the valuation of your company and the term sheets of raising money last year versus what you did this year in 2023, um, and do you go deep when times are tough and shifts are happening? Does that stat, just knowing that the mortgage industry is going to go up and down, interest rates are going to go up and down, but you see these signals that compel you forward when times are tough. Do you draw on that scenario of how far behind we are just to simply solve the housing crisis? Does that keep you going? Like, are there other threads like that that just keep this meaningful when it just seems impossible or really challenging?
Yeah, so I think there's different buckets to that question. There's sort of the missional component, then there's
Mhm.
like the tactical strategic component. I think starting with the missional component, um, yeah, I think it definitely, when times get tough in the market, and you know we're looking to help more people have a great experience buying a home and understanding how they can leverage that biggest asset and biggest buying decision of their life
Mhm.
to have kind of financial freedom and set themselves up well. Like, yeah, there's a missional component that says the work that we're doing is important. And I'll give you an example even right now. So, and this is totally borne out in statistics. Like, we have the highest amount of consumer credit card debt ever, in US history at this point. Um, for whatever reason. But the point being is, like, credit card, I mean, percentages are what, like, I mean, 25, 26, twenty seven
Mhm.
percent interest. I mean, yeah, that's a topic for another time, but it is what it is. But, um, I mean, maybe somebody got a mortgage at 3%, 2 years ago, and rates are at, 7 and a little bit of change right now, but they've got a lot of credit card debt. Well, does it make sense to take out a home equity line or even refinance your mortgage, take cash out because you have equity? So you got 100 grand equity you can take out. Yeah, that's at 7%, but you can pay off your credit card debt off 27%. I mean, that's a, you put a performer around that, that's a no brainer. You
Mhm.
would, you would totally do that. And so, and we have that information on a lot of our customers. We don't necessarily
Mhm.
know if they're in credit card debt and stuff, but we can tell, like, um, obviously what they got their mortgage at, how much equity they have in their home,
Hmm.
um, and a lot of other things. So can we empower the people using our system to use that data to be a great trusted advisor to their past
Mm.
customers? Like,
Yeah.
hey, did you realize you have all this equity? And I know rates are high, but I've been talking to a lot of people who are struggling in different areas. Like, probably not you, but if it is,
Mhm.
I'd love to have a conversation and tell you what your options are, so you can help. I mean, or, like, maybe somebody. But it's also helping our customers build those relationships. I mean, our healthcare system is obviously challenged, and so maybe you get in a really bad accident, or your spouse needs some type of surgery or treatment or something, and um, like, you just can't afford to pay for it. But okay, maybe if you take out another refinance or whatever. Like, I mean, you have this asset here that is, home prices have gone up. So you have this asset that has massive amount of equity sitting in it. And it's like, people don't realize that you can access that and you can do stuff with that. So that's just one scenario, but that's where it's like, okay, great. How can we help our customers and kind of, you know, y- you know, uh, provide value to homeowners and aspiring homeowners. That's from like a missional standpoint. I think
Hmm.
one example, and I think from a tactical standpoint, I've just seen time and time again, timing matters. Um, it's timing is basically either going to be wind in your sails or wind in your face.
Totally.
And and so depending on market conditions, like different things are going to resonate. So I mean, if it was a really hot market, people are doing a lot of loans. It's anything that's helping them maybe do more loans or process more loans. Kind of those efficiency gains
Hmm.
are really important. So maybe you release a product or a module based around that. Um, or maybe people also have a lot of, more discretionary spending. They're looking to market more, recruit more, right? We have a recruiting product that did, um, had a lot of interest when the market was good, but then as the markets become more challenging, it's like, people are cutting. They're not necessarily recruiting. So it's been hard to sell that. Um, so I think it's looking at just the market and the macro and understanding, okay, like what's resonating today. But then I think if you really can time it right with where's the market going to be 6 months or a year from now, and you start building today towards that, you're that's how you can have, some real home runs. And just so I think we're always thinking about that. Like what's the market at today and how we can provide value tactically and from a mission standpoint, but then looking like what's our theory 6 months, a year from now? Like the roadmap is heavily influenced by our thoughts and opinions on what's coming with the market. So we can try and get the puck there before um, you know, the market kind of catches up.
Yeah, totally. I can follow you through all that. So let's talk about the next 12 to 18 months, and then we'll kind of transition to kind of wind down the conversation. So what we'll do some crystal ball questions real quick. I'll do like a 12 to 18 month sort of top priorities and how our listeners could potentially contribute to helping you go in that direction. And then we'll kind of shift to a 5-year question in a sec. So what's sort of the outlook for 12 to 18 months, and how might our listeners in some way, shape, or form play a role in helping?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I think that are you saying more like market or more just ADM 12, 18 months, if you will?
You and your business,
Oh,
your
okay.
focus. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think for me, the next 12 to 18 months look like by starting in 2024, I think there's going to be um, for me personally, I think there'll be kind of a new focus on sort of like personal health, if you will. Not that I'm
Cool.
unhealthy or anything, but that's going to be, I'm maybe not as in good of shape as I was a year ago or 2 years ago. So I think it's kind of that forming a new routine. I've always been a night person too, which is hard when you have family. So trying to shift to a morning person might sound trivial, but to me, that's been very elusive, and it's hard to exercise at 5 or 6 at night. so, um, so anyway, that's the big kind of personal shifts for me. I think as it relates to the business, um, we're marching towards that total solution, which has all the data and the warehousing component, if you will. Um, I think next year is going to be a lot of um, we have our reliable motion, so a sales motion, which is to get in with sort of top producers. I think there's going to be a lot of top down conversation and contracts with bigger companies that want the data stuff, um, and so I think for us, there's going to be a lot of execution, kind of figuring out what's landing, what's working with these new products over the next kind of 12 to 18 months, if you will.
Mhm.
There's probably not maybe an opportunity for us to scratch adjacent verticals. So, we have some companies that, they have the real estate, mortgage, title, and insurance all on our platform, and they just kind of built into our system, which is really exciting. But like, there's a lot of opportunities for us to expand there as well. Probably not next 12 months, but maybe over the next 18 months, I would say. How people can really, I think, support us and follow us. I think it's, to the extent you have people in your family that are involved in real estate transactions, happy to talk to them and see if we can help. So I think our goal is to help them um, do more transactions, provide a better experience, get time back in their lives. I think there's always been this element where I've worked with so many different realtors over the years. Realtors are like one of the few groups of people that will pick up their phone day or night, not knowing who's calling. Like, I don't know what that number is. It's 7 at night. I got to pick it up because it could be, I mean, that's a stressful, tough way to live. And our system does a lot of things to prevent those types of phone calls.
Hmm.
And that's a big part of our mission for sure. Is to help is to help bring a little bit more balance and sort of save time for our customers. So yeah, happy to talk and see if we can see if we can help. But yeah, I'm excited for the next 12 to 18 months. I think there's a lot of good stuff ahead of us. So you know, we'll see.
Take us out 5 years. So let's do this rapid fire. Okay, I've got a bunch I want to just throw in, kind of a minute at a time here for the next
Sure.
little bit. So the most exciting vision you have for 5 years, whether personal, business, or both, just let's throw it out there for fun.
Most exciting vision would be figuring out how this product we've created can help people in other um, in in other verticals, if you will. So things like insurance, title, whatever that looks like. So making a bigger impact beyond what we're doing right now.
Cool. Okay. Something that's happened to you in your life or career that few will believe.
Um, there's a lot that come to mind. I'm trying to think of one that it's probably reasonable for me to share.
Don't hold back.
Let me. A good one would be this. I mean, this is I've got a few that are pretty absurd, but I'll give you one that's like I know for sure I can share. Um, yeah, when we were doing renovations on our office, having a painter and a contractor get into a fist fight in the atrium of our office building, and then having the floor guy buy flooring, take the reimbursement money, return the money, and having to send one of our people, then having to track him down and find a way to get that money. So I would say just that whole experience was absolutely absurd.
Well, I want to dig more into the folder of memories you have. There sounds like there's a lot more, and that's a crazy one.
Yeah, have a little. We have a drink. I've got some stories that you would not believe, but some of them are probably under some type of confidentiality, and others it's just I don't know if I want that out
Yeah,
there in
yeah,
the
yeah,
world.
totally. And we've met once, and if we meet again, which I hope we do, we'll go through that. Can you think of anything off the top of your head that would qualify as a horror story in the hiring realm? Biggest hiring
Yes.
mistake or horror story, quickly.
So this isn't the most costly mistake. This was like a support person. Um, was not a good hire. So basically, one of our biggest customers at the time was basically messaging support about XYZ. And, she's maybe a month in at this point, and just the answers are so bad that basically this guy at this bank copies me on the support answer and says, "Hey, did you guys implement a new bot or something for support? Because I have no idea what this, just FYI, like this, because it isn't working very well." And it was not a bot; it was that person. And
Oh no.
yeah, they were dismissed not that long after I got that email.
All right. What about the biggest hiring success story you've heard or seen, and what was the secret to it being successful?
I think it has to do with stages and what you need. Um, so I think that there's a way of looking at that, like in the long run. So, like our head of product wears a lot of different hats, and I think in the long run has just provided so much guidance and value to our company. I think like in the absolute immediate, I think it's um, I think it's either sales, like someone got in there and just brought in a bunch of sales, or someone on the engineering side got in there and just started shipping code extremely quickly. I would say more on the sales, and I think our current sales leader is a good example of that. He has been in this industry and has a lot of relationships, and was just able to bring a massive amount of interest and engagement to us, like, really, really, really quickly. So I think that's both the kind of quick and long examples.
Perfect. So talk to me about the qualities briefly that you look for in the people that you want to have on your team.
More executive level or more like just anybody on that works at Aidium?
Mm, I would probably lean more toward the executive level, but not to say that discounts. I'm sure the values trickle down, right?
Absolutely. So someone needs to be able to call me an idiot to my face, and be willing to say when I'm wrong, um,
You want your
and
dad. You want
obviously
your
back.
dad in the room to get in the ring with you again. I can see it.
Maybe it comes from that. Maybe it's just to like, look. I mean, I don't want people that are saying yes, and
Right.
I mean, like, let's hash it out. You want people that have an opinion. Um, I think it's the self awareness component. Can we
Hmm.
have real conversations about challenges and deficiencies?
Hmm.
And I think it is that driver component. Like, are you going to continue to push things and make it better? Like, if you're just executing everything I'm telling you to do and you're not putting your own spin on it or figuring out ways to do it better, then you're a lot less valuable. So I would say those are the three keys.
And so, what if one of our listeners wanted to come work for you? How would they go about it? And on top of that, consider what would be a really unique approach someone could take to really blow you away and make you say, I'm going to hire you on the spot.
So we do have a job page on our site, thinkadium.com. So think an AIDIUM.com. Um, so I mean that would be how you could look at that. I feel like the way that you would have to wow me is, um, I think if we have an open role and you can find that, then figure out a way to convince me that you're the best person at that role. If we don't have an open role, you have to show me how you're going to provide so much massive value to what we're doing, um, to really get my attention. So like, can you kind of do some diligence, figure out where we're struggling, what are some ideas, and we can grow, and then can you almost come up with a plan and or show me what you would do to really drive massive amounts of value in a quick amount of time. And if you could do that in a way that was unique, I mean, it's worth saying that, like, everyone gets a lot of emails, and I probably get 10 emails a day of these people who promise me they can give me all these leads and grow my business. So it's like, if you can find a way to convey a message that's really unique and obviously well researched, I think you would um I would consider it for sure.
Okay. So, I'm going to rip through a few more. If you could go back and tell yourself one thing earlier in your career off the top of your head, what would you say in 30 seconds?
I would say, um, yeah, I would say probably do a little bit more research, talk to, talk to more people, talk to more customers, um, and then figure out what you want to be the best in the world out of the gate, but make sure that the rest are in in a position where you can provide value to them.
Okay. What about a brand new entrepreneur that's just getting started? Quick advice for them.
Uh, um, Read as much as you can, get as many mentors around you. Entrepreneurship is basically running into a brick wall, getting up, running in a different direction, running into another brick wall, and eventually you kind of find your way up the mountain, so to speak. So if you can read or learn from others to avoid getting into, running into brick walls, great. It's one less brick wall. Understand you're going to run into a lot of brick walls. Um, so just don't ever run to the same brick wall twice. So don't get down on yourself when you run to brick walls. Just don't keep, go the other direction, learn from it. Just don't ever be in a position where you hit that brick wall again, just because it's that, then you're just running into too many brick walls. So, I mean, you're going to run into a lot of them, but, don't ever make the same mistake twice, and make sure you're writing down your mistakes and what you learn from them.
Mm, I love that. What about the difference between maybe somebody that's an emerging entrepreneur that's got some traction, maybe with a pilot product of some sort, and compare that to the advice maybe you'd give to somebody maybe even at your level or beyond, what feedback would you have or vision would you want to help them cast to succeed?
Yeah, the pilot product is, I mean, understand very clearly what your value proposition is. Like, and the way you do this is by asking, so what? So if someone were to
Hmm.
say, you know, oh, well, I have a product that helps, um, people, I mean, like, I mean, you do, I mean, yeah, like just like, I have a product that helps somebody make a better grocery list or something. Okay, well, so what? Like,
Hmm.
well, that, can save people a lot of time. Okay, well, like, well, so what? So you just keep going down that till you finally have a so what that is really compelling, and people are like, okay, well, that is that. Like, I got to tap into that. I got to get that thing. And so I would say, like, the pilot person, understand what that so what is, and just figure out a way to deliver it. You don't need to spend a ton of money building a massive app, and you can use tools like a Zapier or Google Sheets and just do all these weird things to kind of just maybe get to that scratch at that so what. You get a few people to try it and validate it. I think that's when you start to put money in it. But get that validation. Don't spend a lot of money building something without the validation. And if you can't get the validation and you tried, and that so what isn't valuable and people don't care, like, then maybe that's a good indicator for you to maybe try to come up with that next idea. And there's nothing wrong with that. For the person that's sort of at my stage or beyond, I think it's building a great leadership team and culture. Think about the culture that you want, and once that genie's out of the bottle, it becomes really hard to bring it back. So if there's people that you think are maybe not a great fit at your organization or on your leadership team, um, not much is going to change for them to become a good fit, unfortunately. And so the sooner you can figure out how to get um, the right people in the room, the better it's going to be. So unfortunately, like, we move fast and people can change, but it takes time. And if you have that one leader you're hoping they'll change, they might, but it'll take 2 years, and you might not
Hmm.
have a company at that point. So you gotta kind of make the be decisive.
I love that one. Okay, so to wrap this up, one final question, to give our listeners a full 360-degree view of who you are, and you kind of shed some light on this with your personal health goals, which I thought was awesome. But what really lights you up and recharges your battery, outside of the obvious things? What are 2 to 3 non-obvious, more personal things about you that you're most passionate about outside of work that most people probably don't know, and that you're willing to share?
Yeah, sure. So there's the consistent kind of things that I love, and then there's the, like I said, the sort of obsessive thing that grabs my attention, which always changes. So kind of the consistent things that I love to trail run. I love to be outdoors. I love to, like, do things like play. I'm a fairly competitive person, so kind of playing. It's like playing cards or like games like that with my wife or friends or family, or just different athletic type of events. Um, I those are things that consistently bring me joy. The things that sort of change can be all over the place. I've gone through phases where I love to kind of get into cooking, or I get into making craft cocktails, or I really get obsessed about something like chess or a certain topic. And so that's just all over the place. I think, um, I would say that the obsession right now um, would probably be, I think it was kind of golf, and not even so much like I don't have a lot of time to play really, but just learning about it. And, like, I've got a little bit of land, so getting a little mat and just hitting balls type of a thing.
Hmm.
But that was an obsession that kind of captured me a bit. I would say the obsession right now is around maybe some different philosophical topics. So, listening to some podcasts, reading some books, kind of writing and thinking through my own thoughts on it. I think there's some philosophical topics that really captured my attention. And so if I have like an hour on a Saturday, that's something I might want to, go outside and listen to a podcast or something like that. It's really interesting to me. But I bet you 3 months from now it'll be something else, and I just kind of roll with it.
All right. So, what final thoughts would you like to leave our listeners with, including how they can contact you should they want to continue the conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. Best way is find me on LinkedIn. I tend to avoid the other social media platforms, but I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me. Spencer Dusebout. Connect with me, message me. Happy to connect with you. I think final words are, I think just I think don't be too hard on yourself and think about kind of what trajectory you're looking to go on. I mean, there's a lot you can control, a lot you can't control. There's a lot of people that are have tried to start a lot of businesses that are probably smarter and harder working than me, and just for whatever reason, it's been really hard and it's been bad timing or different. It's just outside looking in. Um, they might look a lot less successful than me or others, but in reality, they've worked harder and they are smarter. And then on the flip side, there might be people that look incredibly successful, and maybe they had an idea and timing was perfect and they got really lucky and they didn't even work that hard for it. Right. I mean, so I would say, like, don't look at I would say try not to take an outcomes based approach, just control what you can control, and um, work hard, do your best and learn, and understand that there's no one size fits all or one perfect, perfect formula, if you will. You have to find a way to be most productive for yourself, and figure out what motivates you, and only you know that. So I would look inwards before I looked outwards for other people to tell me what to do, or how you should do certain things. So yeah, you are who you are, combination of nature and nurture, and I would say the more you can kind of figure that out, the more you can build a really cool business and build a really cool life around that. And that's something I wish that I'm still figuring out, and I wish that I that I wish that I knew, you know, a number of years ago.
Well, let's put a period on it there. That's a wrap. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was great.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the Bear Hug Experience. Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please give us a like, click, follow, or subscribe. We appreciate you taking a moment to give us a quick rating and a written review so we can continue to expand our reach and inspire the next generation of leaders to help make this world a better place. You can also contribute to the conversation around this specific episode by using the comments section of whatever platform you're on. And last but not least, if you have direct feedback, a question, or a guest you'd like to suggest that we have on the show, please shoot us an email at podcast@bearhugrecruiting.com or visit bearhugrecruiting.com/podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and we look forward to having you join us again on another episode of the Bear Hug Experience.
What?